FSB. FSB.
Well, good morning and welcome to today's webinar, which is Small Steps, Big Impact, Sustainable Changes for Small Businesses. And it's brought to you by FSB and Eco for All. So my name's Ian. I'm Deputy Chair of UK Policy for Federation of Small Businesses, and I particularly lead on sustainability. So talking to both government, but also to SMEs about what's needed to help SMEs with transition to a low carbon, sustainable future and how we can make our businesses more resilient as a result. And I'm going to be your host for the next 60 minutes, but I'm not the person doing the talking today. We're really delighted to be joined by Lynn Lapworth, who's founder of Eco for All, a business she started with the purpose of simplifying sustainable living. So she's going to demonstrate the power of small changes that we can all make to create a more sustainable way of life, and doing that in a way that's accessible and affordable, that we don't have perhaps that feeling of overwhelm, but we can realise that everybody can make a difference. She'll be sharing some simple, achievable, sustainable improvements that you can make in your business. So we're going to cover clear, accessible definitions of what sustainability actually means. One of the things we've noticed from FSB research is that actually some of the terminology that we sometimes use is a bit confusing. As ever, any area of issue tends to get its jargon buzzwords, and we want to try and simplify it and get rid of some of that today. What small, sustainable, consistent actions can drive significant long-term results, some practical eco-friendly changes that you can actually make in your office, and some simple ways to reduce environmental impact through day-to-day tech use in particular. Now, a few bits of housekeeping. We're going to use the Q&A for any questions that you want. Don't feel you have to wait till we finish. Drop them in there and then we'll get to those when we get to the Q&A time at the end of Lynn's talk. So just drop those into the Q&A. Some we might be able to respond to immediately via text in the Q&A. Others that we will respond to verbally at the end of Lynn's talk. The session is being recorded and so will be available shortly on our in-demand page in case you'd like to watch it again. And everyone who registered will receive an email with the recording link and any resources mentioned during the session. And can we have a link to that FSB research about terminology? I've just had the first question pop in. Absolutely, I'll pop that in there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lynn. So Lynn, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, I will do my screen share. And while that is loading, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining today. Obviously, it's Earth Day, which in my humble opinion, we should be celebrating Earth Day every day and be more conscious about what that means. But, you know, I'm a small business owner myself, so I know the pressures that we're all under. So taking this precious hour out is important, but also appreciated. So a very quick introduction. As Ian said, my business is Eco for All, and I kind of call myself an environmentor. Made up that word, quite pleased with that one. But basically, the business exists to help people make sustainable changes and, you know, just make it really accessible to everyone. I really firmly believe there is something that we can all be doing. You know, those small steps that I'll be talking about a lot in this presentation. So, you know, it is a case of sometimes where do we start? It's an overwhelming topic. I get that. So basically, all of my services revolve around keeping it simple because life is complicated enough. So my mission with the business is to serve and support as many people as possible to make changes that will benefit their health as well as the health of our planet. So firstly, I want to talk about a different type of science, neuroscience. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. So they do not like the idea of big change. They're really resistant to, you know, the discomfort that comes along with making big changes. So they bring up feelings of fear, potentially anxiety, maybe some excitement, but ultimately our brains prefer routine and predictability. So that's where the idea of making small changes is so much more successful. So even tiny micro changes, we're basically on a much safer route with our brains because these small changes bypass our brain's resistance to change. So that's where your success rate is going to start improving much more quickly. And by starting with tiny changes, we do something little, but it's more likely to be successful because it's of the nature of it. And if you succeed with that small change, you then start to build up your confidence. So then you look for the next small change. And that is how we gain momentum. Our confidence still keeps growing, and we just keep going forwards. And as we know, that the late great Dr. Michael Mosley wrote an entire book on the benefits of changing just one thing at a time. So I'm going to start very gently on the basics. Just start from where you are, but whatever you do, just start. And I think by the nature of you being here today, that is definitely counted as just starting. You probably, have already started your journeys as well. Maybe just pick one change from the webinar. I've got a lot in here that I'm packing in. If you're feeling confident, you're already on your journeys, pick up to 5. But there is something in here, as I say, for everybody. I just want to make sure that you are not going to feel overwhelmed at the end of this because there is so much in here, but just pick a few and start from there. So looking after everything you own. It's not something that gets talked about a lot, but by the nature of looking after everything you already own, let's think about that. Everything in our homes, in our offices, has a carbon footprint. It's already taken materials, energy, transportation from the planet. So by looking after what you have, you are going to make it last longer. And whether that's a bit of maintenance required along the way, but by making all of your devices, for instance, there's going to be a lot around tech today, then you are prolonging the life of that, which is then going to save you money from replacing those sorts of accessories. Okay, so the other mindset shift that we can look for is to not waste. You might recognize this gentleman. He's obviously the king of our mission. Turns 100 next month, can you believe? But his famous quote simply says, "Live the way that you want to live, but just don't waste. Don't waste electricity, don't waste paper, don't waste food." And I don't need to really add to that. As I've just hinted, everything that we own has taken resource from the planet. So to then waste that is criminal, to be quite frank. Okay. And the other mindset shift, there's no such thing as a way. Not a pretty picture, this one. But bear in mind, when you do put something in your general waste, whether that's at home or at work, it's got to go somewhere. And yes, we know about landfills, but I think 58% in the UK of our waste now is incinerated. And if you're putting plastics in your bin and that's getting burnt, that's then releasing toxins into our air. So, very small tip to get you going is to simply add the word landfill to the general waste bin at work or at home, because that is a real mindset shift, knowing that that's, whatever you're putting in that bin is going to end up, either in landfill or being burned is a permanent reminder. So what does sustainable actually mean? We use it a lot, obviously in, the environmental terms, but the Oxford English Dictionary explanation simply says it's capable of being maintained or continued at a certain rate or level. It's that simple. The reason we use it in environmental terms is because there are 8 billion of us, and the majority of those 8 billion are not living in a manner that our planet can sustain. The most prominent example of that is something called Earth Overshoot Day. So this is the day that we mark every year where humankind has used up the amount of resource that it takes our planet a whole year to replenish. So last year, we hit that date on July the 24th. So 7 months in, we had used up a whole year's worth of the Earth's resource. Clearly not sustainable. 20 years ago, that date was August the 22nd. So it's heading in the wrong direction. And just to make a point about how we're living in the UK, there is something called a country overshoot day. And last year, the UK hit that on May the 22nd. So we're responsible for a lot of the stuff that's going wrong. So let's look at what we can do about it. I'm going to ease you in very gently. So look at your office space, whether you're working from home, whether you are, in an office with other people. Look at the environment that you're sitting in. So this one is something that we've talked about for many, many years. Think about what you really, really need to print off. It's a no-brainer, right? But sometimes that reminder helps. Reducing how much you print not only saves on paper, it saves on ink and it's saving on electricity. So just again, bring that to the forefront of your mind and don't print where you don't need to. There's a better option for everything you buy, full stop. Absolutely everything. So if you're a notepad addict, because we all like to make notes, mental load, right? Look at whether you can buy one that's got recycled paper in or with a cork cover. Cork is a really sustainable material. It's natural, it's renewable. So the trees that they harvest the bark from, the trees remain standing. They just harvest the bark to make the cork. And, it's not a case of it's causing deforestation. It's produced mainly in Spain and Portugal, so not on the other side of the planet. And your best tip is to look for an FSC approved cork where you can. So there is lots of resource. One particularly is called the Green Office website if you want to look for more eco-friendly office supplies. Like I say, this is just a suggestion, but there will be many more out there. So, we all have our branding, but one thing that we can do that's actually a really simple shift is to look at what font that you're using when you are printing. There are these range of fonts that we're kind of calling eco fonts. That means they're either not solid, so they've got tiny little holes in, or they are thin or have been condensed, so basically use less ink when printed. So Ryman's, the stationers on the high street, introduced the idea of not using like a solid font. And you think about all of the stationery, all of the merchandise that they will have had printed, it mounts up. In fact, HarperCollins, the publisher, switched to a more condensed font in 2017. And the reason they did that is so they could fit more words on a page. And with the amount they print, they've since saved well over 100 million pages just by making that one small change. And then something that is a bit of a bugbear for most people, keeping recycling bins is so important. Make sure you know what can be recycled and what should go in general waste. Don't wish cycle, which is just I'll put it in the recycling and they can all sort it out at the recycling plant. It's not good practice. So if you want to lean on somewhere that helps remove all of the confusion, there is a great website called Recycle Now. And that has a search function in, so you can put in your location. Coventry and Warwickshire are blessed with a world-leading facility. And if you're interested, it's in Sherborne in Coventry, and you can actually go for a tour. I have been. It is very interesting. Maybe that's just me, but for geek. There have also been some changes to regulations last year. So businesses employing more than 10 full-time employees are legally required to separate dry recyclable materials from food waste. So I've popped an article in here on workplace recycling for you as well. And then simply in your work environment, literally go green. So by that, I mean surround yourself with plants. Humans have a desire to be connected with nature. It is a thing. It's another scientific term. It's called biophilia. We respond to being surrounded by other living things, which is why we feel so much better when we're out in nature. Having greenery around you creates a much more cheerful space to work and is proven to reduce stress, and also proven to increase productivity by 15% over a bare office. Plus, again, such a nature nerd. Nature's clever. So if you put plants in your space, such as peace lilies, aloe vera, spider plant, chrysanthemums, there are more, these can actually filter the air you're breathing in your office. And that's quite important because the air indoors is between 2 to 5 times more polluted than the air outdoors because of various toxins we're introducing. That's a whole nother topic. Okay, probably the single biggest change that you could make after today is potentially change your bank. So the world's biggest banks have invested since the Paris Climate Treaty in 2016, so only in the last 10 years, some of our biggest banks have invested around £6 trillion in fossil fuel projects. That is not okay. That's your money. So if you're using Barclays, HSBC, Standard Chartered, there are many other banks, but Barclays and HSBC particularly are the biggest offenders. They are taking your hard-earned money and using it on fossil fuel projects. So switch banks. Again, these are a few suggestions. There are more. The Cooperative, Triodos, Starling, Nationwide, you've probably heard of all of these. They have made a stand that they will not invest your money in fossil fuel projects. So if you use one of these banks, I highly recommend you switch and make sure you tell your old bank why you're leaving, because they need to know that we do not accept that sort of behaviour. Okay, that's a big one. Right, I'm going to talk tech. So there is a lot here. I've got some statistics to share with you to start with. So manufacturing a single smartphone requires approximately 160 kilos of raw materials per smartphone. It requires around 12,760 litres of water and produces around 60 kilos of CO2 equivalent emissions. The average device is used for just 2 to 3 years before being replaced. So, bit of a problem, not sustainable. Mining for minerals has also severe environmental consequences. Lithium extraction has a massive carbon footprint, consumes roughly 500,000 gallons of water per tonne of lithium produced. Okay, depleting water resources are always a factor. We are in global water shortage because of many, many factors. But, lithium exists in places where it's potentially already arid, so like Chile's Atacama Desert. We need to be mindful of this. And e-waste, electronic waste, it's growing at an alarming rate because we've all got to have the latest tech, right? Approximately 53.6 million tonnes of e-waste was generated globally in 2024, and only around 17% has been formally documented as properly collected and recycled. So I've put a link to the source in here. So I'm assuming we can share all of these links for you after the presentation. But where's this e-waste going? It's going to go and sit in landfill. And all of those minerals and the carbon footprint of it in the first place, we really need to be more mindful. So what can you do? According to the UN Environment Programme, they have put together some research. And one thing that is going to help with the carbon footprint of data centers, I don't know if this is something that you have ever considered. So data centers, the transmission of data, it accounted last year for 1% of all energy related emissions. So between 2020 and 2030, that is set to double. So think about every single photograph, every document, every video that you have stored virtually, because that is actually backed up in these data centers. And these data centers are massive. They're huge warehouses on sites of massive sites of huge warehouses. This all takes a lot of energy to power and enormous amounts of water to keep them cool. This is the big problem with data centers is the cooling systems, because these hard drives emit a lot of energy. So, Google has revealed that its data centers, just for Google, consumed 6.1 billion gallons or 23.1 billion litres of water in 2024. And that was 20% higher than the previous year. Microsoft have reported an increase of 34% in water usage between 2022 and 2024. So this is important. So what you can do, avoid duplicates. Check all of your different data storage providers and make sure you don't have duplicates. Like I say, videos particularly have massive file sizes. So another thing that you can be doing is, making sure you're deleting these files, keeping your virtual storage as clean as possible, but also keeping on top of maintenance of your devices. So by keeping your hard drives cleaner as well is also going to lengthen the lifespan of your laptop. Back in my day, we used to use a term called defragging. Don't know if you've come across that, but anything to, compress files, optimize your device, and that's going to, like I say, reduce the frequency that you are replacing your tech, which ultimately is going to save you money. So by introducing a weekly or a monthly cleanup routine into your schedule, maybe it's the start of the week, maybe it's the end of the week, but setting a reminder, again, mental load, I've been there, I am there. So set a reminder, introduce this to your schedule, because this will have a huge impact. Circularity, it's another term we like to use, isn't it, in environmental contexts. Basically, it means that rather than sending something to go and sit in landfill or be incinerated, let's look at where we can reuse something. So when you do need to replace those devices, consider buying reconditioned tech. It's becoming more and more readily available. And as I touched on, globally, we're producing over 60 million tons of e-waste. So thinking about where you can buy reconditioned is going to help massively. So providers, there is Backmarket, there is CEX, there is EuroPC. These are all reputable companies to try. CEX has a high street presence if you prefer to speak to someone. Backmarket I've used regularly. In fact, the laptop I'm speaking to you on is from Backmarket. They have warranties, guarantees. They are very transparent about the condition of the item that you're buying. And there is also the potential for part exchanging your old models, which again is going to save you money. So, if you are concerned about the condition of your old tech and you think maybe it's not worth anything when it comes to part exchanging, you can simply recycle it. So, there are companies such as Reeboxed, Carphone Warehouse will also take your old tech, as will Currys. And if that isn't to hand, there is also a helpful website called Recycle Your Electricals. It's the one that's really kind of bright purpley pink with the very strange looking cat. You may have come across it. Okay, the numbers game. So if you send 20 emails a day for a year, that can emit as much CO2 as driving your car for 1,000 kilometers. We really send a lot of emails, don't we? Just consider every time you're about to send an email, whether it can be as short amount of text as possible. So that means maybe avoiding doing a reply to all as well, where you don't need to. Avoid that because that takes more power than just a shorter text email. Look at obviously the size of the attachments if you're sending attachments. Generally, most email providers give you a prompt as to what size attachment you want to send. If you can have it as small as possible, then that is all going to benefit. So we're not just looking at, the storage of this email at the end game, we're also looking at the power it's required to send it in the first place. This is the numbers game, How many emails have we received and sent over the last 30 years? And conversely, look at what emails you receive. We're very good at going, I'm not interested in that, let's just delete it. But if you're not interested, unsubscribe so that email isn't sent out to you in the first place. It's a really good habit to get into, really good practice. So really think about all of those emails and what really needs to be sent and what really needs to be received. Okay, the AI conversation. This is huge again. A few more statistics. AI data centers consumed approximately 1 to 2% of global electricity in 2023, with predictions suggesting this could reach 3 to 4% by 2030. That's pretty big. AI, as we know, is everywhere. It is the future. However, we have to be mindful of its impact. So water usage for cooling AI data centers is significant. Some facilities use up to 3 to 5 million gallons of water every day. Just think about that for a minute. And again, the e-waste factor. So anything with AI capabilities have special chips. And the average lifespan of those special AI chips is around 3 to 5 years before needing to be replaced with newer tech. So there is the e-waste issue as well. If you're fully invested in AI, it's part of your business, there are better options. So there is an AI provider called Green PT. It is a subscription-based provider, but they start from about sort of £4.50 per month for the basic to subscribe to use them. And there is Ecosia, which I will explain more about later. But if you use Ecosia, that has its own chat as well. These are both hosted on renewable energy sites. So yeah, I put a link in here to Green PT. It's hosted in Europe, which may or may not make you feel a bit more reassured. And it's very, very hot on its privacy as well. So there's a link in there for you to look at that. There is some good news, yay, around AI. So the carbon footprint of AI varies dramatically based on energy sources. So operations powered by renewable energy produce up to 40 times fewer emissions. So definitely worth looking at those two examples I've just shared. And digital content creation. So, using AI, it can produce around 60 to 85% fewer emissions compared to traditional production methods. So, we're talking like photo shoots, on location, transportation of all the equipment. There's always, you know, big costs incurred, especially if you're going abroad for these location shoots, physical studios, etc., that all need power. So there are circumstances where using AI to produce an image can actually save on emissions. And with content creation in producing PowerPoints, for instance. So here's just a very brief example that if you're doing the research to put together a 10-page presentation, you can actually save time on, doing that internet research, looking at different websites. It can take you, say, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. However, if you then do an AI search and you're very short and precise around the instructions, that can help cut the time on your research. And it's being really precise with the instructions that you give AI. So cutting out your please and thank yous. I know we're very British, we want to be polite, but the less wording that you put in your AI instructions, the better. Again, it's the data storage, the processing of that instruction. So there is time to be saved. There is potentially energy to be saved in the right circumstances. So I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, switching your browser. This one you can literally do as soon as we finish today. If you don't already use either Ecosia or Ocean Heroes, I highly recommend you switch. So Ecosia is a web browser that you can add as an extension within Google Chrome. It has its own free AI chat, as I mentioned a minute ago. It's powered by renewables. And basically, as you're searching, clicking on ads, etc., it will plant trees on your behalf. And very excitingly, sometime in the next week, they're going to hit the figure of 250 million trees planted worldwide. Always makes me a bit emotional, that does, because it's massive. And they work with local communities as well in their tree planting schemes, which you can view. If you need a little lift, you can view that on their homepage. And then the other browser is Ocean Heroes. I appreciate I've hit my half an hour nearly, so I will speed up. Ocean Heroes basically take plastic from the oceans on your behalf, and they both display your contributions as well in the home screen. So, it's worth taking a look at that because there is so much progress being made. In March this year, Ocean Heroes collected 701,469 bottles just from people using a different web browser. Right. Very lastly, this is something. Oh, my screen's frozen. Just bear with me. There we go. Using local suppliers, supporting small local business. Now, you and I both know the importance of this. We basically, by supporting small local independents, ideally, that's going to shorten transportation of deliveries, which means obviously less fuel and emissions. Oh, I'm having a few tech issues. Isn't that typical? Okay, I'm going to carry on. So, there are so many valuable reasons for supporting small local businesses. The FSB actually reports that small businesses account for 99% of all UK businesses, and that we are more likely to prioritise sustainable and ethical practices. So by supporting small local businesses, you can put money back into the economy. You have that peace of mind that you have, supported a business that is more likely to be sustainable and more ethical. Plus, you can build up that relationship. And then you can start to say things like, can you send me that without plastic? Or, if it's a consumer thing, then you can maybe ask for a vegan option if it's like catering for a client, for instance. So, there were many, many good reasons for supporting UK, local suppliers. Right, tech issues. Okay, just let me come out of there for a minute and just go on to my last couple of slides. So apologies for the tech fun. Right. Okay, here we go. Very lastly, if you've taken something away from today, which I'm really hoping you have, there are other ways that I can be of help. I host something called a Ramp Up Your Sustainability program. This is to enable you to make changes to your everyday habits around the home through a series of monthly sessions. And then each one has a theme, so energy saving, reducing food waste, recycling, technology, etc. It's a 12-month program, it's £42 per month. And I do offer payment plans. So do let me know if you'd like to go on the waiting list for the next intake, which is October. And if you know of anybody that works for medium to large forward-thinking companies, I also host eco wellbeing sessions, which help those companies with employee wellbeing sessions that to empower their employees to live more sustainably. They feel invested by those businesses, but also by taking some form of action that helps to reduce their eco anxiety. So benefits their mental health. 1 in 6 of us admit to having eco anxiety. So I do offer those sessions as well. And very lastly, in July, on the 1st of July, I am hosting a one-off session called Send Plastic Packing. We're all breathing in 6 grams of microplastics every week. We know plastic is based on fossil fuels. It's an oil-based product. We know it's damaging our health. We all want to do something about it. So if you want to scan the QR code and join me for that session, I will be sharing lots of ways that we can be removing and reducing plastic from our environment. So I hope you found that helpful. Plastic Free July, just to share alone, is an initiative that happens, like, as you could imagine, every July. Last year alone, they had 170 million people from 190 countries across the globe take part. So we're part of something much, much bigger. The numbers of people making changes is huge. So please don't think that you are doing this alone. You are very much not. Numbers are growing every day. Awareness is growing every day. So thank you very much for listening and bearing with me. I hope you found that helpful. Any feedback, constructive criticism would be very much appreciated, but I will stop sharing and let you take all that in.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And it's time for some Q&A. And we've had quite a few questions appear in the chat. So I'm going to kick things off. The first question, Lynn, and I guess this is a general point in terms of information. Obviously, you reference various statistics.
Yes.
And a question about where we can get references and where we can find some of those. Some of those I've dropped in the chat, but
Yes.
we will be circulating a copy of the PowerPoint. And what we'll try and do before we circulate it is maybe put some reference points and so on
Yeah,
there.
there were
So
1 or
people
2
can
in
find that.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. A question about you mentioned good banks and where those choosing to make investment. And I will just add a slight note here. Some of those banks which may not be making such good decisions about investment are doing some other good stuff around net zero. So I'm quite involved in some of those around the carbon reporting within banking data and so on. So HSBC is one of those. So it's a mixed bag. But in terms of investment, culture within banks? Where can we find that sort of list about investment culture and where they're choosing to invest their?
So there's a couple of resource, and there was one which sadly no longer exists called Make My Money Matter. I believe there is one called, oh gosh, I think it's called Green Banks,
Okay,
or
okay,
Switch It Green. I believe that has some helpful resource in there as far as financial matters
yep,
is concerned.
thank you. So the question about AI, obviously, that's one of the big hot topics. Somebody said about, just making sure you use less CC and BCC. I guess also one of those things is looking at your emails and saying, do I really need to keep the entire thread of the last 50 emails on
Yes,
the email that I'm about to reply to, or can I just
absolutely.
go through and delete it? So it's little things like that, is it? That,
Yeah, it
and
all
again,
all adds up.
where's that data? Is there somewhere we can find the data about data power usage and where that is from an email perspective?
From an email perspective, yeah, I can, like I say, I can pull all of this together and
Fantastic.
share that. Yeah,
Thank
no
you very
problem.
much. Um, what's the two companies you mentioned for AI? And just to say, in terms of information, the
Yeah,
PowerPoint is going to be shared. So some of this you'll be able to get glean from that. But the AIs you mentioned that are particularly eco.
yeah. So Green PT, that's the one that has a subscription requirement. So, but like I say, it starts from £4.50 per month. Um, if you want to use something that's free, so that Ecosia web browser that I mentioned that plants trees, that has a free chat that's obviously hosted by Renewables. So you can
Fantastic.
use Ecosia for free.
Somebody's commented, Ecosia is brilliant, been using it for years. So I think that's one thing I've definitely, my two top tips that I picked up from you today. One was around putting some plants in my office. My office has none in at the moment. And secondly, about just that simple, could I make a use of an alternative browser on that? So that's something I will definitely be looking at. Um, somebody's asked, do you know EcoFlix use local production teams to produce nature films, etc.?
I know the name. I can't say I know very much about them.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
anybody who wants to check out some of that, check out
Yeah.
EcoFlix and have a look at what they've been doing. Um, so any information on how to be greener and still inclusive and accessible. And I guess this is one of those key challenges, isn't it? Some of the things that can make things more accessible, usable, come with a carbon footprint. We've talked about AI, and of course, AI is being used for transcripting and all of those sort of things, but at the same time, it's using energy. So, any tips you can share around that, balancing that accessibility and carbon footprint
Oh
element?
gosh, that's putting me on the spot. That's a very that is a very tricky one. I would probably have to have a little mull of that one.
Yeah.
In complete honesty, I don't want to sort of start saying things that maybe,
Yeah.
are speaking
I
out of
mean,
turn.
I will just add a quick, it is a complex one and it's not easy. I mean,
Mm.
I'll give my own example. I'm a cyclist. I use bikes as a form of transport because that reduces carbon footprint. However, one of the things is there are, we have got e-bikes, which, yes, they have a slight battery footprint, but overall they're still a carbon reduction. And there are a lot of things now. There's a great organisation in Liverpool who are looking at how you can make sure that e-bikes are also accessible. So looking at e-trikes and e-trike cargo bikes and things like that. And actually, this works quite well because it means some of those people can't necessarily drive a car. So this actually gives them a form of mobility, which is better. And combination ones, which are wheelchair. And so there are things out there, but it is very much an emergent area. And so what I'll try and do on that is try and find some resources that perhaps we can share around where that balance is happening. Eco web hosting. Obviously, we
Yes.
talked quite a bit about tech. Web hosting, what do we need to look for? Because on that,
Yeah, so the ones that spring to mind, there is a company called Crystal, which starts with a K. They have renewably powered web hosting. I use a company called GreenNet for my web hosting. They also host my email, which I'll be completely honest, it's a little clunky. It kind of feels like it's out of the 1990s, but it does me and it's affordable. So, that is always a factor. But they do host websites as well. And, that one is so much simpler. So Alex uses 20i for her web hosting.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there are a couple of standards out there, the names of which off the top of my head uh, um, escape me, around this, which you can look for on a web hosting company. So I use a web hosting company which have 100% renewables as their energy source
Yeah.
and things like that. The UK based data centers, so again, less transmission of data because most of my audience. So it's things like that. It's not just a simple case of which hosting company you use, but if your customer base is largely UK based and you're using a hosting company in South America, your data's being transferred further all the time, which means therefore you are increasing your, and it also means you can look at things like Cloudflare and things like that, which are distributed web systems. And
Mm.
again, that means the data is not having to travel as far all the time.
Yeah.
And the stuff
It's,
around the actual website you design to
yes.
make it more sustainable as well.
Exactly, small images. There's things like Smush, isn't there, that can compress the image
Yeah.
size on your web site. So basically, it loads more quickly, which is making it more accessible and more appealing to Google, but also,
Yeah, and in there you've mentioned a key point, Lynn, which is, of course, many of these things we've talked about actually have other business benefits as well. So if you reduce the footprint of your website from a carbon perspective, it increases its speed and performance, which also means that actually your website will be better for customers and it will do better on search engines. So there's normally a win-win-win on some of this,
there
isn't
is,
there, Lynn?
there is. Yeah,
Um,
win-wins.
Somebody's commented they use 20i for web hosting and making sure a website has no broken links, less images and videos. Absolutely. Though again, a balance to be struck with more people wanting to do that. Lynn, what would you say is the biggest mistake you see people making when they're looking at their sustainability journey?
Um, oh gosh, I'm tempted to say it's not a mistake, but feeling like they can't make a difference, because it is numbers game, as I've touched on, um, and don't feel like you're alone because again, we can't we can't delay on making as many changes as we possibly can. I touched on the figures that of people that are involved in Plastic Free July, 170 million people from 190 countries. So we don't know about these statistics necessarily, but there are so many people making changes. So I would say, that's not necessarily a mistake, but more of a mindset is you can make a difference and it's vital that you make every single change that you possibly can.
Yeah,
Um,
and don't feel you've got to do everything from day one. Go and make,
Definitely.
that point you made at the start about make one
Yes.
change. I'm a
Yes.
big fan, little things like can you go out of the house with a water bottle
Yep.
filled with water from your tap rather than going and buying water? Can you go
Yep.
out with a spork so you don't have to go and use a disposable fork when you
Yep.
go and get your meal? And can you take a reusable coffee cup? And if those are in your bag as a default, what
Yep.
impact is that having?
That's it. That's it. Keeping your reusable carrier bags for the supermarket, keep them in the car so you not, oh, I forgot them again, just those sorts of things. But yeah, looking at what fits in with your daily habits. So, there's that habit stacking as well that we can talk about. There's just all sorts of ways that you can
Yeah.
just make sure you keep maintaining them as well.
Greenwashing is a term that's often used quite a bit. What is it and how do we avoid it?
Yeah, that's a big one. How long have we got? Okay, greenwashing is basically the term that we use for businesses that make claims to be sustainable, potentially ethical, but eco-friendly, where they maybe don't stack up when you look deeper underneath those claims. I'm not going to call anybody out in particular, but there are, for instance, cleaning brands that have unpleasant chemicals still in them. There's one particular called optical brighteners in some of our cleaning products. Optical brighteners are potentially harmful to aquatic life. There's things like that. But there is also a term called green hushing. Have you heard of that?
Not come across that one there.
Okay. So green hushing actually happens a lot and it's quite sad. So green hushing is Occurs basically because there are so many amazing businesses that are making great efforts to be more sustainable, but they're not shouting about it for fear of being called out for not doing it perfectly. So it's quite sad, but that does mean that there are so many more businesses out there making
Yeah.
changes that we don't know about.
That's a very good, and actually, we talk a lot. Obviously, this is a small business audience, and I think it's really important for small businesses to perhaps go out there and shout a bit about what they're doing. Because actually, if I look at many small businesses, we almost by default do a bunch of stuff that is actually sustainability.
Mm,
Buying from other local small businesses is tends to be the mindset of most small business owners because you know the value of doing so because you want to support them. But
yeah,
actually, it's a sustainable choice
yeah,
as well. So I think sometimes we do stuff and we don't even realize when we're doing stuff that is sustainable because we're just doing stuff because it's the right good thing to do. And
definitely.
big businesses
Yeah,
are very good at shouting about it. We need to get better about shouting about it.
yeah, definitely. It's like saving energy. We all need to do that right now, don't we? But saving energy is going to save our pocket, save our bank accounts, but also, it's important for the planet too.
Yes, absolutely. Many businesses are perhaps feeling the pinch a bit at the moment. It's not been an easy few years to run a small
Mm.
business.
It
What
hasn't.
what things can people do which perhaps, are not going to break the bank? What things can they do? And actually, I guess quite a few of these things you've mentioned, you mentioned about not using as much ink by using a font. Actually, that's saving you money because let's be honest, those ink cartridges or laser toner cartridges cost a small fortune. So
They certainly do. They certainly do. Yeah, I mean, there are, as I've just touched on, lots and lots of energy saving practices. So, we know about switching to LEDs, but you can, if you don't have the budget to install solar panels, on your roof, what you can do, there are things like solar powered lamps, desk lamps and things like that that ultimately are going to save you money over time. Um, Waste reduction. We don't talk about that one much either, but by producing less waste, you then don't have to rely on the service of removing your waste, whether it's, your bins or skips or whatever that might look like. But by reducing the amount you throw away, you're less reliant on paying for those services. There's all manner of ways that we can ease our pockets and engaging with the community. Actually, that's free.
yeah,
Getting out there with community volunteering, potentially that's free. That's going to sort of raise your profile and your kind of ethical credentials as well.
yeah. Somebody has commented about, greenwashing's been around since the 80s and 90s. And yeah, somebody who was passionate about these topics as a teenager, I remember the talk about it then. And actually, it's saying about businesses now to encourage to be green shouting, which I guess is what we were just alluding to, but with
Absolutely.
everything backed up. And I guess that's the important bit. If you're going to go out there publicly making a statement, you need to make sure that if somebody calls you out on it, that
Mm.
you can evidence it a bit,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, there is no perfect.
No.
We can't, by definition, be perfect. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Because every single day, this was a Jane Goodall quote, every single day we have an impact. We just have to choose what that impact looks like. All we can do is reduce it as much as possible. So we're not aiming for perfect. We're never looking at that. It's not a thing. What we're doing is looking for progress.
Yeah.
And yeah, just
I think again that's perhaps one of those things that can put people off, isn't it? There's a bit of that whataboutism. So you do something and it goes, but what about that? It's like, well, yeah, but I've done this thing. It's a bit like that old story about, throwing starfish back into the sea. It may not have made a difference to all of them, but it's made a difference to that one. And that one change makes a difference.
mm,
But also there's a bit about we do live in this world and we can't change the systems and sometimes we've got to live within those systems, but we can do the things that we have the power to do.
yeah,
And then I would encourage, this is obviously my sustainability and government interaction head on, the other part of this is where you see bad practice and wrong things being done by government is call it out and
yeah.
encourage people to make changes at a national. level as
Yeah,
well.
this is it. This is it. I mean, there's the 25% statistic that if there's a 25% of society behave in a certain way or look for that sort of behavior, then that's the tipping point that we're going to
Yeah,
reach for that sort of expectation to filter out into the rest of society. And the percentages of consumers that are looking for more sustainable businesses is huge now,
yeah,
you know? So,
yeah,
by maybe making a little bit of an investment in your business to try and be more sustainable where you can, that's potentially going to bring in more
yeah.
business in the long run.
So, final question, Lynn. If you could give one piece of advice to our audience today, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Um,
Just a little question to end with.
just a small one. Oh, how many could I come up with? Gosh, there's so many. In a business context or in a personal
In a
context?
business context, yeah, for a
In a
small
business
business.
context, uh, um, I'm tempted to go back to one of the tech comments because tech is just so huge. So
And for many
the
small businesses, it's probably their biggest carbon footprint unless they travel a
exactly
lot.
that, exactly that. So let's go for that instance of introducing a weekly or monthly habit of cleaning up your data storage. Because
Yeah.
as I shared the statistics, data storage is horrendous. It's putting such a massive pressure with power, but also water, and like I say,
Mm.
the global water shortage issues are only going to keep escalating.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever you can
And
do to
I'm going
reduce
to
your
add
emissions.
one tip from me as well. And this is because it's my personal passion, which is, look at the next journey you're making and could you do it via active travel instead of doing our perhaps easy default option of jumping in the car to nip and pick up something or go and see somebody. And it's interesting. There was a stat shared by Chris Boardman, who's the chair of Active Travel England, saying that the difference it would make on NHS waiting lists and so on if we all made more use of active travel because of our overall health and well-being. The impact was enormous, and the number of sick days it would save from work as well. So some great side benefits
Yes, I've
again of
thought of
that.
another one that wasn't in the presentation. There we go. That's the pressure, isn't it? When you're putting on the spot. You can also look at your energy provider.
Good point. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
again not going to cost you anything, but moving to an energy provider, and we know there are quite a
yeah.
few that use renewables.
Fantastic.
There's also, can I give one last tip?
One last tip.
One last tip. Sorry, I know there's so much. There is a really helpful app called Nesso, which is NESO. It's the National Energy Security Office, I think. They're affiliated with the National Grid. If you look at Nesso, it tells you what percentage of the grid is using renewables, powered by renewables at any one
Yes.
time as well.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating to watch.
I'm
Um,
such a geek with
yeah.
it.
So, with that, our time is up for today. Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you to everybody who tuned in and for those who submitted questions as well. Hopefully, got lots of useful information. I hope you found the session useful. You will receive an email which will have links, resources mentioned in it, the video to watch again on demand. If you've enjoyed today, then please consider leaving us a Trustpilot review. Lynn and I are both on LinkedIn as well. So if you want to connect with us, then do connect on there to find out more. And if you're not a member of the Federation of Small Businesses and would like more information on our member benefits, and do have a look at the website as well, which has got resources on there around sustainability for SMEs, then please visit the website and find out more. And we've just had one last sneaky question come in, Lynn, talking about cleaning devices. Anything for the phone to clean it
Does
up?
that mean cleaning up the
I guess
data?
that's reducing the amount of stuff you've got stored on your phone because obviously, well, that's most phones now. That's also on cloud storage as well. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, the same kind of rules apply. Is just cleaning up because we're all guilty of in the
getting rid
digital
of some of those
photo age.
photos.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
take them at events, you know, for my social media, and then I make sure immediately I go back and delete them all off afterwards.
Yeah.
You know,
Good point.
we can think about the size of files that we're sharing on our social media
Yeah.
as well. You know, there's all sorts around that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just again, a routine,
Yeah.
setting a reminder to clean off all of the videos and
Thank you very
photos.
much. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye, and enjoy your sustainability journey. Goodbye for
Thank
now.
you.